It was supposed to be an ordinary hike, a quiet day in the woods before winter swallowed the trails. Jack Turner had taken that path 100 times. Long stretches of pine and birch, the smell of moss, the creak of frozen branches overhead. It was his way of escaping the noise, the phone calls, the empty house. But that day, something was different. He'd just crossed the old logging bridge when his boot struck metal. A hollow clang echoed through the stillness. He looked down. Half buried beneath dead leaves was a small, rusted toolbox. The kind mechanics used in the 1950s, thick steel, leather handle long rotted away. It was so out of place here, among roots and stones, that for a moment he thought he was seeing things. He crouched, brushed away the dirt. The lid was sealed with a corroded latch, flakes of orange iron falling away at his touch. On the front, faint letters were carved into the metal. Property of H. Keller. The name meant nothing to him. Jack hesitated. He looked around. No sign of anyone. Just the whisper of wind and the rhythmic tap of dripping water deeper in the woods. He should have left it there. He knew that. Instead, he lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. Much heavier, as if something inside shifted, dense and unbalanced, making a dull thud like a heartbeat in a box. A chill crept up his arms. He carried it back to his cabin, the sound of metal against his jacket zipper echoing far too loudly in the quiet. When he set it on the table, the air in the room changed, colder, tighter, as if the box pulled the warmth out of everything. Jack reached for the latch. His fingers trembled. The metal clicked. And somewhere deep inside, something moved, slow, deliberate. Not a rattle, not a slide. A knock. Once. Then silence. Jack froze. The hairs on his neck stood straight. Whatever was inside that toolbox, it wasn't just metal. Jack stood there, breath caught halfway in his chest. The sound was impossible to explain. Too heavy to be an echo, too measured to be a coincidence. He leaned closer, ear just inches from the rusted lid. The silence stretched thin. He could hear his own pulse in his throat. Then knock. Again. Same rhythm. Same place. Jack stumbled back, so fast his chair tipped over. No, he muttered. No, no, no. It had to be an animal, maybe something trapped inside. A squirrel? A raccoon? But there were no scratches, no holes, no air gaps. The lid was sealed tight. He grabbed a screwdriver from his workbench, wedged it beneath the latch, and pried. The metal shrieked as it gave way, flakes scattering across the table like rusted snow. The sound stopped. For a moment, all he heard was wind pushing through the pine outside. Then the latch snapped free. The lid loosened. He lifted it an inch, just enough for a sliver of darkness to leak out, colder than the air around it. A smell followed. Faint oil, damp soil, and something metallic, like old blood. Jack gagged and dropped the lid. The box slammed shut with a hollow boom. He sat there for a long time, trembling, staring at it. His breath fogged in the cabin's cold air. When he finally dared to touch it again, the metal was warm. Hot, even, as if something alive had drawn breath inside. Okay, he whispered to himself. It's just heat transfer. It's been buried, insulated. He didn't believe a word of it. That night, he tried to sleep, but the forest outside sounded wrong. The wind moved in steady pulses, rhythmic, like breathing. And every so often, from the corner of the cabin where the toolbox sat on the table, he heard it. Knock, knock, as if whatever was inside was learning how to keep time with his heart. By morning, the knocking had stopped. Jack told himself it was exhaustion, that his mind had filled the silence with something that wasn't there. But when he came into the kitchen, the box had moved. Only an inch, maybe two. Enough to leave a clean rectangle of dust beneath it, sharp-edged, perfect. He stared at it, coffee cup half-raised, every rational thought in him dissolving one by one. He muttered, earthquake. But the cabin hadn't so much as creaked. He set the mug down, hands trembling, and touched the toolbox. Cold again. Absolutely still. He told himself he'd open it today, no matter what. He brought it out to the porch where the light was strong and real. The forest stood quiet. No wind, no birds, not even the usual creak of the pines. The air felt thick, heavy enough that he could almost hear it pressing against his eardrums. He slid the screwdriver under the lid again. Metal groaned. The hinge flaked apart. This time, the lid opened fully. Inside lay a thick layer of black soil, damp and clinging to the steel. Buried in the center was a small object, round, smooth, no larger than an egg. It pulsed faintly, like something bioluminescent deep under the sea. Jack reached for it, then froze. The earth inside the box shifted, tiny vibrations like a breath passing through dirt. He could hear it, a low, almost human murmur, words forming beneath the surface and fading just as quickly. He jerked his hand back. The light inside the box flared once, bright enough to sting his eyes, and then vanished. He staggered away, kicking the box off the porch. It hit the ground with a dull, wet thud, tipping over. Soil spilled out onto the moss. But the pulsing glow didn't fade. From inside the overturned toolbox, the small round object rolled free and came to rest at the edge of the step. Jack stared down at it. The light beat slow and steady, a rhythm that wasn't random at all. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. It took him a moment to realize what it was doing. It was spelling. J-A-C-K. Jack's stomach dropped. He stumbled backward until his boots hit the steps. The pulsing light followed the rhythm again, slow, deliberate, spelling each letter as if it knew exactly who was standing there. J-A-C-K. The glow dimmed to a faint heartbeat. He whispered, "That's not possible." But the thing seemed to hear him. The light fluttered once, like it was responding. Then it rolled, by itself, down the step and into the grass, leaving a faint trail of steam in the cold morning air. Jack ran after it, his breath clouding. It came to a stop in the shade of a birch tree, the moss around it trembling ever so slightly, as if the earth was breathing with it. "All right," he said aloud, forcing his voice steady. "You're a battery. Some kind of old signal thing. Maybe heat-reactive metal." Even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The surface of the sphere wasn't metal anymore. As the sun caught it, it shimmered like skin stretched over glass, translucent, organic. Something inside it twitched. He knelt slowly, reaching out. His reflection bent across the surface. His face fractured into a dozen pieces. When his fingertip brushed it, a ripple of warmth spread through his arm and up his neck. His vision blurred for a second, and he saw something, somewhere. A corridor. Concrete walls slick with water. And at the far end, a man standing knee-deep in a pool of dark liquid, holding an object identical to the one before him. The image snapped away. He gasped, stumbling back. The light flickered rapidly now, faster and faster, pulsing like a Morse code signal. He grabbed his phone, filmed it, replayed the pattern. 5 bursts, a pause, 3 more. He Googled it. The translation chilled him. "Under you." Jack froze. Slowly he looked down. The moss between his boots was shifting, small clumps lifting, sliding aside as something beneath the ground moved upward. He jumped back as a corner of corroded metal broke the surface, then another. The shape rising from the soil was rectangular, familiar. Another toolbox. Identical. And this one was already open. The sound of metal scraping against stone filled the clearing as the second toolbox surfaced completely, pushing through the soil like something exhumed from a shallow grave. Jack's throat tightened. He could smell the earth. Wet, sour, metallic. The new box sat in the moss, lid bent open, edges caked in mud that looked disturbingly fresh. Inside, the same black soil churned, breathing faintly as though stirred by invisible hands. The sphere, the one that had spelled his name, rolled toward it, bumping softly against the box's rim. Jack stumbled back, heart pounding. "No. Nope. You're staying right there." He turned and ran toward the cabin, feet crunching leaves. He locked the door, slammed the windows, drew the curtains. His breath came in sharp bursts. But even through the walls, he could hear it. Faint thuds from the woods. Not rhythmic this time. Random. Uneven. Like footsteps. He grabbed his rifle from the rack, loaded it, and pointed it toward the door. "If someone's out there," he shouted, "you picked the wrong damn day." A knock. Soft. Slow. Not on the door. From under the floorboards. Jack froze, the rifle trembling in his grip. The sound came again, closer now, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. He stepped back, pulse roaring in his ears. Then, with one final hit, the board beneath the table split open. Cold air rushed up from the crawl space. The smell hit him instantly, that same damp soil and oil, thick enough to taste. He crouched, gun still raised, and peered into the dark gap. At first, he saw nothing. Then, as his eyes adjusted, a faint glow appeared below, blue-white, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something was down there. Jack grabbed his flashlight, pried the floor wider, and shone the beam in. His blood ran cold. Beneath his cabin was a narrow tunnel, the walls lined with boxes. Dozens of them, each one open, each one empty. And at the far end, half buried in the dirt, a hand, gray, unmoving. Reaching out from the soil, its fingers curled around a small, glowing sphere. The light inside it pulsed once. Then again. Then, in perfect time with his racing pulse. J-A-C-K. For a moment Jack couldn't move. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. A tunnel full of open toolboxes, their lids warped and empty, and that gray hand gripping the same impossible sphere. He whispered to himself, "They're old, just old." But the word old didn't fit. Nothing that old could still glow. The air seeping from the crawl space carried a hum, almost too low to hear. It wasn't electricity, it was alive. He swallowed, set the rifle down, and grabbed his flashlight again. "Just look," he muttered. "Just look, then cover it up." He lowered himself into the gap. The soil was cold and damp. It sucked at his boots as he dropped into the tunnel. The walls weren't carved or dug. They were melted, as if heat had bored through solid earth. Each box he passed was marked the same way. Property of H. Keller. The same name. Over and over. Stamped into rust. The hum grew louder. Ahead, the tunnel curved slightly, ending at that outstretched hand. Jack crept closer, the beam trembling in his grasp. The body it belonged to was half buried, face down, skin gray and leathery. The arm that held the glowing sphere twitched. Just once, a faint spasm like a reflex. Jack's stomach turned. "No, no, you're not." The corpse moved. A long, wet breath wheezed from its chest, stirring dust. Its fingers tightened around the sphere. The light flared bright enough to blind him. Jack stumbled back, fell against a toolbox. Its lid snapped shut under his weight, hard. Instantly, the glow in the hand dimmed. The hum stopped. The corpse froze. The silence that followed was total. Jack crawled backward toward the opening, dirt under his nails, panic clawing up his throat. He hauled himself out into the cabin and slammed the board back into place, heart pounding. The cabin was pitch dark. The flashlight flickered, then died. He sat there in the silence, trying to breathe. Then, faintly, from beneath the floor, knock, knock, knock. This time, it wasn't one set of knocks. It was many. Every box down there was knocking back. The floor shuddered with each knock, not loud, but deep, like a heartbeat under wood. Jack backed against the wall, clutching the rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. He could feel the vibrations crawling up through the soles of his boots. There wasn't one rhythm anymore. There were dozens, hundreds, all slightly out of sync, creating a low, sick pulse that filled the air like the breath of something enormous buried just below him. He shouted, "Stop it!" But his voice cracked before it even left his throat. The knocking paused. Then, from directly beneath him, came 3 slow taps, perfectly measured. He recognized it instantly. J-A-C-K. He fired. The rifle blast split the stillness, boards splintering, soil erupting from the impact. Smoke and sawdust filled the room. For a moment, there was nothing but ringing silence. Then something pressed back. The shattered floorboards bowed upward, flexing like something alive was pushing from below. His breath froze in his lungs as dirt sifted out from the cracks, rolling like tiny avalanches toward his boots. He ran to the door, fumbled with the lock, but the metal latch was rusted solid. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice. It didn't budge. The air in the cabin thickened, humming again. The boards swelled. Then, one by one, gray hands punched through the floor, thin, stiff, jointed wrong, grasping for the light. Jack screamed and fired again. The shot tore through one of the hands, but it didn't bleed. It crumbled into flakes of ash and rust, scattering across the boards. More arms followed. Dozens. Each gripping small spheres that pulsed in perfect time. He bolted for the window, smashed through the glass, and hit the ground outside hard enough to knock the air out of him. The forest spun around him, too still, too quiet. Behind him, the cabin groaned. The roof creaked, timbers bending under unseen weight. From every crack and corner, light poured out, not yellow or white, but that same impossible blue. He crawled backward through the dirt, whispering, "What are you? What do you want?" And the answer came, Not from the air, but from inside his head, quiet as a whisper in his own voice. "We're not what you found, Jack. We're what you buried." Jack froze. The whisper didn't echo. It lived behind his thoughts, as if the voice had skipped his ears entirely. He pressed his palms against his head. "Get out," he hissed. "Get out of me." "You brought us home," the voice murmured. "You always do." The forest around him flickered in and out of focus, trees warping like reflections on moving water. The cabin behind him was no longer burning blue. It was breathing. The walls flexed with every knock from within, boards pushing outward, inhaling and exhaling. Jack stumbled to his feet, dizzy, rifle slipping from his hands. He ran, blindly, through the trees, the earth soft and uneven underfoot. Every few steps, the world shifted, shadows stretching too long, roots twisting as if trying to trip him. He didn't stop until he reached the old bridge, the same one where he'd first found the toolbox. The planks were damp, slick with moss, and in the middle of the bridge sat the first box. The original one. It was open again. Inside, the black soil churned like water, and that small, glowing sphere pulsed weakly, as though it were dying. Jack edged closer, shaking. "What are you?" The sphere flickered, its light sinking to his voice. Then images, not in his eyes, but inside his head, sharp and immediate. A younger version of himself. The same clearing. A shovel in his hands. Dozens of toolboxes stacked beside a pit. His face calm, mechanical. A man beside him, older, gray-haired, handing him one last box marked H. Keller. "You'll forget everything when it's done," the older man said. "That's the point." The memory ended as suddenly as it came. Jack staggered back, clutching his chest. "No, that's not me. That can't be me." The voice returned, now in both his head and the air around him, layered and thick. "You buried us to forget. You hid the things that made you human. Fear, guilt, memory. We waited for you to come back." The soil in the box rippled. The faint outline of a face rose from the dirt. His face, lips moving in perfect sync with the voice. "We're what's left of you, Jack. The parts you couldn't carry." The soil burst upward, spilling across the bridge, crawling toward him like liquid shadow. Jack turned and ran, but no matter which direction he went, the forest seemed to twist around him, funneling him back toward the cabin. And above the wind came one more whisper, soft, patient, inevitable. "You can't bury yourself forever." Jack burst through the tree-line, lungs searing, boots dragging through mud that clung like glue. He could feel the earth trembling under him, shallow ripples that followed his every step, as if something massive was waking beneath the surface. The cabin loomed ahead, no longer his. Its roof sagged, walls swollen and blackened by whatever had seeped through them. Blue light leaked from the seams, crawling across the boards like veins under diseased skin. He stopped at the edge of the clearing. The air buzzed, a low electrical hum mixed with a sound that was almost breathing. He whispered, "It's not real." The forest answered back in his own voice. "Neither are you." He lifted the rifle again, though his hands shook so hard the barrel wavered. He didn't know if he planned to shoot the cabin, himself, or the thing whispering in his skull. Then the front door opened. Slowly, a single figure stepped out, barefoot, covered in dirt, wearing his jacket. Its eyes glowed faint blue, the same light pulsing from the ground. Jack's mouth went dry. It was him. Younger. Whole. The double smiled faintly. "You never finished the work, Jack." "What work?" "You tried to bury your guilt," the double said, voice calm, patient. "You packed it into metal and sealed it away. You thought if you hid it deep enough, you could start over. You thought you could make yourself new." Jack's pulse roared in his ears. "I didn't bury anything alive." The double tilted its head, almost sad. "You didn't know what you were burying." The ground split open behind it, the sound of cracking timber and tearing roots. Rows of toolboxes pushed through the soil, hundreds of them, lids creaking open like coffins. Inside each one, faint blue light flickered, heartbeats, countless and steady. Jack stumbled backward. "No, stop it. You can't," the double said. "Every time you ran from what you did, another box was born. Another version of you. We've been waiting for you to stop running." Jack looked at the spreading glow beneath his feet. The hum was louder now, trembling through his ribs, through his mind. "What happens if I don't?" he whispered. The double smiled again. Then we'll remind you. And from the open boxes, the whisper rose, thousands of voices in perfect, terrible unison, speaking through the forest, the air, and his own lungs. Remember, Jack. The word remember echoed through the trees, vibrating in the soil, in the sky, in his bones. Jack dropped the rifle. It hit the ground without a sound. Every voice was his. Hundreds of them, overlapping, whispering, crying, pleading. The air itself seemed to pulse with memory, every breath dragging him closer to something he didn't want to see. His double stepped toward him, slow and calm, as the world around them flickered like film catching in a projector. "Stop," Jack said, but his voice was small, childlike. The double raised its hand and touched his forehead. The world went white. He was in the woods again, but younger. Rain poured hard enough to blur the trees into gray shadows. His hands were raw from digging. Beside him lay a man, face down in the mud, motionless. Jack stared, horrified. "No, no, please." The younger version of himself, the one holding the shovel, whispered. He slipped. The ground gave way. "I didn't mean to." But the man's skull was crushed. The shovel's edge was red. Jack's heart stopped. The dead man's face turned toward him, older, kind, familiar. The same name, the same initials. H. Keller. The man he'd worked for before he left town. The one who'd disappeared. Jack fell to his knees. "No, I didn't." The younger version didn't look at him. He just kept digging. And one by one, toolboxes appeared, each filled with soil, each sealed and stacked in the pit. "You built your own graveyard." The double's voice whispered from everywhere at once. "You buried the truth piece by piece, until there was nothing left of you but the guilt that couldn't rot." The ground beneath him began to collapse, boxes tumbling open, the glowing spheres spilling out, rising like embers through the rain. Each one pulsed with fragments of sound, voices, laughter, screams. Jack screamed too. "Make it stop." The double appeared beside him, face expressionless now. "You can't kill memory, Jack. You can only live in it." The light became blinding. He felt himself sinking, not into soil, but into time, into everything he'd buried. The air filled with whispers of all his forgotten selves, and for the first time, he realized they weren't trying to hurt him. They just wanted him to see. The last thing he heard before the white swallowed everything was his own voice, clear and quiet. "Now remember why you started digging." When the light faded, Jack was standing again, shovel in hand, breath fogging in the cold. The woods were quiet except for the steady drip of rain. The ground before him was freshly turned, a grave-shaped wound in the earth. He dropped the shovel and fell to his knees beside it. The pit wasn't empty anymore. Dozens of toolboxes gleamed through the mud, all of them open, their contents staring back at him. Photographs. Hundreds of them, black and white, old Polaroids, snapshots of faces he didn't know but somehow recognized. A girl in a raincoat smiling on a pier. A man fixing an old truck. A child holding a wooden bird. All marked with one name in his handwriting. H. Keller. His throat tightened. Why would I?" "You didn't bury a body," the voice said softly. "You buried everyone who ever knew." He looked up. His double stood at the edge of the pit, water sliding off his jacket like oil. "You erased the witnesses, the people who could tell the story. You thought if you buried their memories, yours would fade too." Jack shook his head violently. "I don't remember any of that." "That's because you made it so." The rain thickened. Each drop hissed where it hit the mud, and from every photo rose a faint glow, not blue now, but amber, warm, human. The faces in the photographs began to move, lips parting, eyes blinking. He stared, horrified, as they turned their gazes upward, not at him but through him. The double knelt beside him. "They're the ones who kept the truth when you couldn't. Every lie you told became a box. Every memory you sealed away became one of them." Jack whispered, "Then what's in the last box?" The double smiled faintly. "The first thing you buried." He pointed behind Jack. There, half sunken in the mud, was a single toolbox unlike the rest, not rusted, not old, its surface gleaming as if untouched by time. The initials on its lid weren't Keller's. They were his own. J.T. The lid quivered, not from wind, but from something inside pressing to get out. Jack's voice broke. "If I open it, you end the forgetting," the double said. "But you don't get to choose what comes back." The rain stopped. The forest held its breath. Jack crawled toward the box, mud clinging to his hands, his heart pounding like it was begging him not to touch it. He placed his fingers on the latch. It was warm, alive, and the voice inside whispered, almost tenderly, "Welcome back, Jack." The sound of his name, whispered from inside the box, struck Jack harder than any memory ever could. It wasn't just a voice. It was his voice, younger, raw, unbroken by guilt. "Welcome back, Jack." His hands trembled over the latch. The box vibrated gently beneath his fingers, almost as if it was breathing. The warmth pulsing through it was rhythmic, heartbeat steady, human. "God," he whispered, "what did I do to myself?" "You tried to start over," the other voice, his double, said softly behind him. "Every time you buried the guilt, you buried the man you were. Each time, a new version of you took his place. This one," he gestured toward the box, "is the first, the one who began all of it." Jack looked over his shoulder. The double's eyes glowed faint blue again, though softer now, almost sympathetic. You can't live without knowing what he left behind. Jack shook his head. "If I open it, I don't come back. Maybe not, but at least you'll finally be whole." He took a long, shuddering breath and flipped the latch. The lid creaked open. Warm air rolled out, thick, sweet, like the scent of rain on hot iron. Inside lay an object wrapped in cloth. It pulsed faintly, light bleeding through the folds. Jack reached in, peeled the fabric away. It wasn't a sphere this time. It was a heart. Small, perfectly preserved, still beating, not with blood, but with light. Each thud sent ripples of warmth through his hands and up his arms, flooding his chest with something between memory and pain. The world around him shimmered. The trees swayed though there was no wind. And then it began, the flood. Images poured into him, unstoppable. Him as a child, finding his father's tools. The first time he lied about breaking something he couldn't fix. The first time he dug a hole to hide the pieces. The first time it worked. The same ritual, repeated across years, across lives, not burying things, but parts of himself. Every secret, every failure, every heartbreak. He'd made a habit of disappearance, until nothing was left but fragments, rust, and echoes. The double knelt beside him now, voice low. "Every box you buried was a memory you refused to live with. That's why we called you back." Jack looked up, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. "And if I put it back?" The double's expression didn't change. "Then you disappear again. The guilt sleeps. The world resets." Jack stared at the glowing heart, its light reflecting in his wet palms. For the first time, he realized he was holding the only piece of himself that had ever been honest. He whispered, "Then I guess I'm done sleeping." And he pressed the heart to his chest. The instant the light touched his chest, the world screamed. It wasn't sound, it was memory tearing open. Every buried moment, every sealed box, every whispered lie rose all at once, crashing through him like floodwater through a broken dam. He saw everything. The accident, the body, the blood pooling beneath the pine roots. The weeks he'd spent digging in the rain, terrified that the police would find him. The plan that had come to him in desperation. Bury the evidence, bury the memory, build something new on top of it. The first box, the hum, the way it worked, how each time he used it, it took a piece of him and sealed it away. He hadn't stumbled into the woods to find the box. He'd built it. Jack screamed, not from pain, but from the unbearable weight of truth. His vision blurred white, and he collapsed into the mud. The glow spread through his veins like wildfire, illuminating his body from within, a map of everything he'd hidden. The forest trembled. All around him, the other boxes split open. Light poured from them, rushing toward him like water returning to a riverbed. Every version of him, every face, every sin, folding back into one. The double stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. "You can't hold all of it, Jack." Jack's voice was barely human. "It's mine." The ground shook harder. The trees leaned inward, trunks groaning as roots tore free. The forest was collapsing inward toward the center, toward him. He staggered to his feet, light pouring from his mouth and eyes. "I remember everything." The double shook his head slowly. "No one survives remembering it all." Jack looked down at his chest. The light from the heart was fading now, sinking into his flesh until there was only warmth. For the first time, there was no hum, no knock, no whisper. Only silence. And in that silence came understanding. The boxes weren't cursed. They were confessions. Every one of them a truth he'd been too afraid to face. He turned toward the cabin, its frames splitting, windows shattering as the forest continued to fold inward. Then maybe it's time it ends with me. The double's face softened. Then you know what to do? Jack stepped toward the cabin's glowing door, light bleeding from every seam, and whispered the words that had once been used to seal his guilt. Cycle 0. The ground erupted. Blue fire rose skyward, devouring the trees, the boxes, the memories. And Jack, the real Jack, walked into the light. The forest dissolved into brilliance. Branches twisted upward, fracturing into lines of pure light. The sound of wind became static, then silence. Jack walked forward through it all, into the burning cabin that wasn't burning, into the storm of every version of himself. The air was thick with whispers that no longer frightened him. They were familiar, almost kind. You remember now. You built us. You buried yourself to live. He stepped over the threshold, and the cabin's interior stretched endlessly. A hall of mirrors, each reflection a different Jack. One screaming, one weeping, one still. He stopped before the oldest version, the one with tired eyes and hands black with soil. The reflection spoke first. You think forgiveness comes from remembering? Jack looked at him, voice steady for the first time. No, it comes from stopping. He pressed his palm to the mirror. The glass rippled, warm, and the old Jack smiled faintly before fading like smoke. Then the collapse began. The ground sank, boards twisting, air bending. The boxes that had littered the floor melted into liquid light, running toward the heart in his chest. Each pulse slowed the world's unraveling but burned deeper into him. He dropped to his knees, gasping, feeling memory and matter fuse together. Pain, love, violence, warmth, everything becoming one weight. The double appeared beside him again, fading in and out like a dying signal. You were supposed to forget. It was mercy. Jack coughed, a thin trail of light spilling from his lips. Mercy's not living half a life. The double knelt. Their faces were identical now, same exhaustion, same eyes. Then what are you going to do? Jack looked at his trembling hands, light leaking from every pore. I'm going to give it back. He drove both palms into the floor. The world screamed as the glow poured outward, flooding the ground, racing through roots and soil. Every box, every fragment, every echo burst open at once. Light surged into the sky, cutting through the clouds. The earth roared. And then, stillness. The light faded. The forest was gone. Jack stood in an open field under a pale dawn. The cabin was dust. The boxes were gone. The air smelled of rain. He touched his chest. The heartbeat was quiet now, faint, human. For the first time, he felt empty. Not hollow, clean. And then, carried on the morning wind, came a final whisper, calm, almost grateful. Thank you for remembering. The world was quiet in a way Jack had forgotten existed. No hum, no pulse beneath the ground, just wind and birdsong. He sat in the wet grass, light from the early sun washing over the field that had once been a forest. He could see the outline where the cabin had stood, a rectangle of scorched earth and nothing else. The sky was soft gray-blue, unbroken. He looked down at his hands. No glow now, only scars, dark lines running across his palms like veins of rust. He whispered, "It's done." But even as he said it, part of him waited for the whisper to come back, for something to move beneath the soil. Nothing did. He stayed like that until the sun climbed higher. Then he stood, legs stiff, and began walking toward the road. The air felt heavy, charged, but alive. Each breath tasted new, even if it stung his lungs. After half an hour, he found the logging bridge, or what was left of it. The boards had collapsed into the stream below, the same stream where he'd first found the toolbox. The water ran clear now, no trace of rust or soil. On impulse, he crouched and looked down into the current. For a moment, he thought he saw his reflection, until it blinked. Another face stared up from the water. Not quite his. Younger. Calm. The reflection smiled faintly. You can't unmake what you made, Jack. You can only let it grow. He flinched, heart pounding. You're gone. A memory. I don't go anywhere. The water rippled, distorting the image until it became a swirl of light. Something small drifted toward the shore. a shape catching sunlight just beneath the surface. He reached in and pulled it free. A toolbox handle. Rusted, broken, but still warm to the touch. He almost dropped it, but then, for the first time, he smiled. "All right," he said quietly. "We build something new." He placed the handle back into the stream and watched it float away, turning gently in the current until it vanished around the bend. The voice in the water whispered one last time, fading like wind through leaves. "Remember, don't bury this one." Jack looked toward the rising sun, the empty field behind him, and nodded. Then he walked on. By midday, the road curved into a stretch of open field that looked untouched by whatever had consumed the forest. The grass was tall and gold, whispering in waves. It was beautiful, painfully so. Jack stopped, shielding his eyes against the glare. For the first time in what felt like lifetimes, he felt something close to peace. Not relief, not forgiveness, just the quiet weight of existing without the echo of guilt humming behind it. He lowered himself to the ground, leaned back on his hands, and stared up at the sky. It was endless. He closed his eyes, and the warmth of the sun pressed into his face. For a moment, he wondered if this was what death felt like, simple, still, and bright. Then the wind shifted. A faint metallic clink carried across the grass, so soft he almost didn't notice it. Another, then another. Jack sat up. The wind had scattered the grass into rippling patterns, long lines, circular swirls, as though something beneath the soil was breathing again. "Not again," he whispered. "Please." But the sound wasn't coming from beneath him. It was coming from all around, thousands of tiny metallic clicks, echoing through the field like rainfall. He turned his head slowly, scanning the ground. Between blades of grass, half buried and glinting faintly in the sunlight, he saw them. Toolbox handles. Hundreds of them. All rusted. All arranged in a perfect spiral leading toward the center of the field. At the center, something stood, small, red, new. A toolbox. Not rusted, not decayed. Brand new paint. Its latch shone gold. Jack's pulse stuttered. He stood, walking toward it despite every cell in his body screaming don't. The closer he got, the quieter the world became. The birds stopped. The wind fell away. Even his own heartbeat felt muffled. When he reached the center, he knelt beside the box. On its lid was a single word carved into the fresh metal. "Remember." His throat tightened. "No," he said softly. "I already did." He stood to walk away, but the box clicked open on its own. Inside was no light, no soil, no strange sphere. Just a photograph. A picture of him, sitting in this exact field, kneeling beside this exact box. The back of the photo bore one short message written in his own handwriting. "If you found this, it means it worked. H. Keller." Jack's legs gave out. The world tilted. Because for the first time, he understood. He wasn't the one who'd buried the boxes. He was the one who'd been buried. Jack's pulse roared in his ears. Buried. The word didn't make sense at first, until he looked again at the neat handwriting on the photograph. H. Keller. He turned the photo over, studying every line of the image, the grass, the sunlight, his own face. But behind him in the photo, blurred and faint, stood another figure. A man in a heavy coat, shovel in hand. Jack's breath hitched. He whispered, "Keller." The name he'd seen carved into every toolbox, the ghost he believed he'd killed, the memory that had hunted him through 1,000 echoes. Keller wasn't the one he buried. Keller had buried him. He looked around the field again, and it no longer looked golden. It looked artificial. The grass swayed in perfect rhythm, every movement identical, as though the air itself was running on a loop. "Where am I?" he muttered. "Home," a voice said. Jack turned sharply. Keller stood a few feet away, the same man from the photograph. Older, calm, eyes tired but kind. His hands were clasped behind his back. Jack stumbled to his feet. "You're dead." Keller smiled faintly. "Not quite. You made me, remember?" "What are you talking about?" "You couldn't live with what you did," Keller said. "So you built me. The memory, the conscience, the thing that could bury you when you asked to forget. You named me after the first man you ever hurt." Jack's head spun. "The boxes. Containment units," Keller said softly. "Every time you fractured, I sealed the broken part away. But you kept finding them. You kept digging." Jack's eyes burned. "So this field, this world, what is it?" Keller stepped closer, boots silent on the grass. "The last simulation. The final layer. The place where you were meant to sleep forever. Jack's hands curled into fists. Then why wake me up? Keller studied him, expression unreadable. Because this time, you fought to remember. No one ever made it this far before. He knelt beside the red box, brushing dust from its lid. You deserve to see the truth, Jack. What happens when a man spends his whole life trying to erase himself? He opened the box. Inside wasn't a tool, or light, or soil. It was a mirror, small, silver, pristine. Keller handed it to him. Look, he said. See who's really left. Jack hesitated, then lifted it. The reflection that stared back wasn't human. His face shimmered, shifting between ages and expressions, young, old, scarred, hollow, until finally the skin dissolved entirely, leaving only light. A light shaped like a man. You're the memory now, Keller said softly. And someone has to bury you. The mirror trembled in Jack's hands. His reflection, if it could still be called that, flickered with each heartbeat. Lines of light webbed across his skin, fading and reappearing like dying embers. He whispered, I'm not real. Keller tilted his head, watching. You were. You just didn't know when to stop remembering. Jack's voice cracked. You said I fought to remember. You said I earned the truth. So what's left for me now? The end, Keller said gently. The one thing you never let happen. The air around them thickened. The field began to fade, blades of grass dissolving into mist. Beneath their feet, dark soil appeared again, wet, heavy, real. A single hole yawned open in the center, wide enough for a man. A grave. Keller handed Jack the mirror. It's for you. Jack shook his head. I don't deserve another grave. Keller's tone softened, almost kind. It isn't punishment. It's release. All your versions, every echo, every lie, need somewhere to rest. You can't keep them alive forever. The wind rose, carrying with it the faint sound of knocking, soft, hollow, rhythmic. The sound of metal on wood. The sound of shovels. Jack looked toward the horizon. Thousands of shadows were walking out of the mist, each one him. Every age, every life. They carried rusted toolboxes in their arms, placing them gently at the edge of the pit. The sight broke him. His knees gave out. I thought I was saving myself. Keller knelt beside him. You were, but saving isn't living. Jack looked down at the pit. The soil was glowing faintly, the same blue as the spheres he'd once feared. And if I go in? Keller smiled sadly. Then the cycle finally ends. Jack looked at the mirror one last time. His reflection flickered again, this time showing something new. Not light, not code. A man. Just him. Tired, flawed, alive. He smiled weakly. Thank you, Keller. Keller nodded once. Good night, Jack. Jack placed the mirror on the ground beside the grave, then climbed in. The soil rose around him, warm and soft. As it covered his chest, he whispered, Don't bury me to forget. Keller's voice answered, distant, fading. No, Jack. This time, we bury you to remember. The last thing he saw before the dark closed over him was Keller standing at the edge of the pit, shovel in hand, his face lit by dawn. One final knock echoed through the earth. And then, silence. Dawn stretched across the horizon like a slow exhale. The mist settled, and for the first time in centuries, or seconds, the woods were silent. Keller stood over the fresh mound of earth, his hands resting on the handle of the shovel. The grave was shallow but peaceful, the soil smooth, dark, and still warm from the light that had vanished beneath it. The hundreds of other Jacks, the echoes, the fractures, the memories, stood quietly in a wide circle. None of them spoke. Their shapes were faint now, fading with every blink, as though their purpose had been fulfilled. One by one, they stepped forward and placed their toolboxes on the ground. Each box sank slowly into the earth without a sound, leaving no mark, no trace. Keller removed his coat and laid it over the mound. His voice was barely a whisper. Sleep now, all of you. The wind moved through the clearing again, but it wasn't cold anymore. It carried warmth, that strange warmth Jack had described, the pulse of life after remembering. For a long moment, Keller stood there, watching the light of morning creep across the field. Then he spoke softly, almost to himself. It's over, Jack. You did it. He turned to leave, but a sound stopped him, faint, subtle, from beneath the ground. Not a knock this time. A heartbeat. Keller froze. The rhythm was slow, steady, impossibly alive. He crouched, pressing his ear to the soil. "Jack?" No voice answered, just that heartbeat. And then, warmth. The ground beneath his hand began to glow faintly, threads of amber light weaving through the dirt. The glow spread outward, tracing roots, stones, the edges of long-forgotten paths. All around him, grass began to grow, tall, gold, and whispering. Flowers sprouted where the boxes had been. It wasn't resurrection. It wasn't haunting. It was life returning to the place where guilt had once ruled. Keller smiled through the tears he didn't know he could still shed. "So this is what you wanted to build." He stood, watching the field brighten until the morning burned white. Then, slowly, his own body began to dissolve. First his hands, then his face, turning to dust that shimmered in the light. His last words drifted into the wind, gentle as a prayer. "Goodbye, Jack." The field remained. Alive, whole, silent. And somewhere deep beneath the soil, a single voice murmured, calm, content, almost dreaming. Cycle complete. Years passed. The field changed. Seasons folded over it like slow-moving waves. Spring's first green, summer's gold, winter's silence. No one remembered a cabin, or a man named Jack Turner, or a forest full of buried boxes. But the locals had a story. They said there was a field on the north edge of the valley where nothing ever stayed dead. Grass grew twice as fast there. Trees took root overnight. When the wind blew just right, you could hear it, the soft rhythm of something breathing beneath the soil. They called it the living ground. One autumn evening, a young surveyor named Mara Wills came across the field while charting land for a new development. Her boots sank into the soft earth, rich and damp. The air smelled faintly of rain and iron. As she crossed the clearing, her foot struck something buried just beneath the surface. Metal. She crouched, brushed away the soil, and uncovered a small, rusted object. A handle, attached to a box. The paint had long since peeled away, but one word was still carved deep into the lid. "Remember." Mara frowned. "Huh, what's this doing all the way out here?" She tried to lift it, but the box wouldn't budge. It was as if the ground was holding it down, refusing to let it go. Then she noticed something strange. The grass around her, still, moments ago, was leaning toward the box. Every blade, every leaf, bending slightly as though drawn to it. And for the faintest second, she thought she heard something inside. Not a voice, not a knock, a heartbeat. She laughed nervously. "Okay, that's creepy." Her phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor. "You find anything interesting?" Mara typed back a quick reply. "Just an old toolbox. Leaving it. Feels wrong to move it." She pocketed the phone, stood up, and took one last look at the strange, half-buried thing. The setting sun hit the lid, and for just a heartbeat, she swore she saw her reflection in the metal, but older, sadder, eyes glowing faint blue. The reflection whispered a single word. "Run." Mara blinked. The image was gone. The box was still. She backed away slowly, then turned and walked toward the road, trying not to look back. Behind her, the field rippled once, a deep, quiet pulse moving through the soil like a breath returning after a long sleep. The grass whispered, faint and rhythmic. "Knock, knock, knock." And beneath it all, from far below, a voice too faint to be heard by human ears murmured. Cycle 1, initializing.